everyone, and welcome to my very first deck list video. My name is Sam from WOTCG, and I want to begin my very first one by introducing you to the Chamimi list that I piloted at the recent ARG in Austin. So to begin, I want to acknowledge that I originally got this list and deck idea from Samuel Sheik. I made some changes, and this is the list that I decided to play. So to begin, we start with Lore. So Lore is probably the best card to play with because you can stop abilities from cancel to activate, but probably one of the worst cards to play against since he doesn't allow you to have fun. And we don't really want our opponent to have fun, we want to win. So that's why we play him. Moving on, we have Arwen. So I understand why a lot of people don't play Arwen, just because she's very hard to get a copy of. In fact, I only owned one, but luckily I was able to borrow two, so I could play 3 total, which I would have been playing 4 if I had the chance. Now why do we play her? Because she's a 1 mana that can tap and give something +5/+5, with the only restriction being that you control 3 or more resonators. Now, I play a lot of resonators in this deck. So as you can imagine, the stipulation is not hard to acquire, and since I can tap her twice in a single turn before and after recovery, you can imagine how great she becomes. Now moving on to Eagle-Me. So Eagle-Me is probably one of my favorite cards that's so common to pull, yet so great to play. For 1 mana that only is 3/3, and unlike Arwen, who is scary looking, even with her beautiful art, and people want to instantly get her off the board, Eagle-Me can just kind of sit there and people don't really care about her. Now this is actually a huge advantage, in my opinion, simply because she's great at just pinging in little damage, so mid to late game, when you banish her, buff something up, you can swing for lethal, and no one is the wiser. So moving on, we have Algernon. So Algernon is a rat. So like most rats, I don't want to play him until he is smart enough to be called a mouse. So obviously, I like to mulligan him back into my deck, and actually prefer to draw him mid-game once I have the 5 stones needed to get the 3 intellect counters. And why do I want the intellect counters? Well, because I can remove one to get +4/+2. So if I remove all 3, that's +12/+6. So you can imagine how amazing that is when I'm trying to buff things up and hit my opponent for lots of damage. Now our first 2-cost resonator. So Viola is one of my favorite green cards that every green deck seems to play but no one talks about. And that's just simply because she's nothing amazing on her own, but she fits well into the meta with the capability of getting rid of reanimation cards or what they target, and she also has the capability to come in, quick cast speed, buff something up, fly, and for a deck where you really want to make sure you get in for damage, even small damage, she's very helpful in that sense. She can also help whenever something is trying to hit, let's say, Eagle-Me for 4. If I really want him to survive, I can flash in Viola, give it +2/+2, and suddenly it lives. Thus, it is decreasing the capability for them to gain advantage, and in fact, it causes them to lose some of that advantage. Now moving on to the next resonator, we have CL's familiar Mike. So Mike is a 2-cost that has very bad stats as a 2/2. He can get in for some damage since people don't see him as a threat, and like Tama, he can kill you eventually. But his ability is great because it is reminiscent, at least to me, of Morgiana from Grim Cluster. He has the capability of right when he comes in, you get to add a card to hand from the top 3 cards, and put the other 2 on the bottom. He can also banish himself to deal 4 damage. So 4 damage isn't huge, but it is capable of killing pretty much all 1 costs and some 2-cost resonators, and just being able to trade up with other things is very nice. So next we have Rachel. So Rachel by herself is just a pure powerhouse of not stats but of ability. So her first ability allows you to 99.9% of the time you're just going to target your opponent. You look at the top 3 cards, you discard 2 of them, you put the worst card that they could possibly draw on top. Sometimes you put all 3 in the grave, but that's very rare since you really want to focus on making sure A, you know what card they just drew into, and B, you know that it's a bad card. Whether you're putting a 6 or 7 cost in their hand turn 3 that you know that they can't cheat in, well, then that's just a dead card to them, which means they have one less draw that's important. Also, anytime she goes anywhere, she gets you a card. You just search your deck, you can search for anything, whether you want a Lori, an Arwen, another Rachel, whatever you want, she's there to get it for you. So they have to be very careful when she leaves the board in any fashion. Next we have Loret's Disciples. So Loret's Disciples is by far the best card to play with Loret, simply because it allows him to gain so many stats that he is a 3-cost, 9/9, swiftness, flying, first strike, precision, drain, and barrier for the entire turn when he comes out, and at the beginning of every single main phase from then on, as long as you control the Loret. So this can become very problematic for your opponent, but you love it, because when he comes out, even if you don't have a Loret, you give him swiftness, swing for 7, and like I mentioned before, damage is very important for this deck, so that's very nice when you can just swing for 7. Even if they block it, you're probably going to win the match, or win that trade. So, good card overall, especially with the Loret. Then moving on, we have Big Boy. So Big Boy is a 4-cost 12/12. So his only restriction being that you control Mimi tribe member, which obviously Chamimi is a Mimi tribe, so that works out perfectly for us. Now his enter gives him swiftness and precision, but he can't attack players. So a lot of times you want to play him, swing into something that's problematic for you, maybe that your opponent wants to live, but can't block him, so you get away with it. And also the resting of a resonator can come in very handy whenever you need to, of course, give him just that little bit of buff. Whether it's because you only have him and Arwen on the board, so you just, before recovery, you just simply tap Arwen. You can't give him +5/+5, but you can give him +2/+2. So moving on, we have Jupiter. So Jupiter is a very simple card to understand in the sense that he's good. He's 5-cost, quick cast, 10/12. He comes in and he can win you games. He can bounce things, he can rest things, he can recover things, he can try a card. He's just overall a really good card and a very good card late game when you're trying to finish off the game. Moving on, we have Seed of Rebirth. So Seed of Rebirth is just a phenomenal card when we're playing a lot of what people call our weenies. So weenies are typically very small things. Of course, we have many small things. So we have Lorites. Maybe you want to play this, get back a Lorite, so you get, since you have Disciples in hand, maybe you get a Mike, maybe you get an Algernon, whatever you need, you can get it. There's only a few cards in this deck that you can't get, and since we're playing so many 1 and 2 costs, it's almost always that you have targets, and the targets are almost always very well for the game state. That's for Rune Story. Now, Rune Story is just a great card with the only restriction being Darkness requirement. Now, of course, Darkness isn't as hard as you think with Speaking Stone in the Stone deck. But Rune Story, even with that small restriction, is still an amazing card since you can force your opponent to banish something, you can get back a Resonator, you can wallow win something. It's just a phenomenal card in many different aspects, and its versatility just gives you advantage in so many different situations. Next we have Fairy Spell. So Fairy Spell is a very simple card to understand. You play it, you cancel something with Quick Cast, you're doing better. whatever you're canceling is probably worth it. Now, of course, in this deck, we're not playing too many because of deck space and the fact that we really want to just focus on making sure that our deck goes not only well, but that our deck just hits hard. So Fairy Spell is only really in there whenever your opponent really tries to play some quick cast that can really mess with your abilities or your resonators or whatever. So you just mainly have it in there for the certain situations. Next we have Wind of Vitality. So Winds of Vitality is a great card just simply because you want to buff things up. And a 1-mana card that can give it +6/+6 is just great. Now you'll see later on how it can, in a sense, add up to more than 600. But for now, 600 is just great. It's a very large portion of a person's health and a hefty way of getting past things or surviving certain cards that your opponent will try to kill you with. Next we have Winds of Salvation. Winds of Salvation is a very simple card. It's a 3-cost pseudo cancel and also works well against things that I don't want in the grave, whether it be a John or even an Athenia, or maybe sometimes people play a Lapis on you and you just really want to cancel it, but you can't, so you just pseudo cancel it. So Winds of Salvation is a great card in that sense. And the final card is Nature's Beauty. So Nature's Beauty is a great card because in Chamimi it costs 1 and you can simply play it. You now get to declare your opponent's blocks until the end of turn, and in case you don't know, you can just declare no blockers. So you can just sit here, swing, they don't respond to the attack, you can say okay, you're not going to block, they're not going to respond to that, you hit them for the damage. So you can guarantee damage as long as they don't have any will up. You know that you can swing in, and there's nothing they can really do about it. Moving on, the most important stone, and the 4 of I love, is Speaking Stone. So Speaking Stone is great because it's barrier. It doesn't come into play a lot, I'll admit, but the few times where I've hit, maybe not even in this deck, but I've hit 2 to 3 Speaking Stones in a row, my opponent will try to cast something like Rune Story, or not Rune Story, but Ruined Earth. Okay, so moving on, we have Speaking Stone. So Speaking Stone is the most important card. It has barrier, which doesn't come into play very often, but it does come into play enough, such as your opponent cannot target it with Ruined Earth, which is very big, and the fact that it produces black for Story Chance, which you really only run 1, which is Rune Story. Lo and behold, Story Chance, Rune Story is a Story Chant. It's a great card, hence why I said the only restriction was playing black. But when you're playing 4 of a certain stone, you're probably going to hit at least 1 within the first 3 turns. 4 turns, I would say, would be pushing it. And Saintly Elvenstone, it's just a little bit of a buff. It's a Windstone, which doesn't really factor into this deck. And the fact that you can buff elves, so if you're going to recovery, there's nothing else you can do. You can pump up that Lorite, swinging for mighty 2 damage. That may not sound like a lot, but trust me when I say that every little bit of damage can help, especially with this deck. The last 2 is Magistrate Venture. It's not quite as good as the Elvenstone because you need another stone to go along with it, or another way to produce green, and it can only target Mimi tribes. But of course, +2/+2 is really good, especially when you're trying to make things big and swing for damage and win the game. So moving on to the runes, we have first Explorer, the Unknown. It's free from the rune deck. You look at top 5, you got to win. You reveal a win Resonator, put it into your hand, randomize the rest, and put them on the bottom. So it's free cost rune, instantly gets you something, and I highly suggest you don't actually play this card the first or second turn unless you know exactly what you need for the game. such as there are times where I don't have a laureate in hand, but I have the disciples. Going to the second turn, I actually use this, try to look for laureate, so even if my opponent doesn't do anything on their turn, I can still flash it in, go to my turn, play the disciples, and boom, disciples is online, turn 3. Or I'll save this because I have everything that I need. It gets later into the game. I realize, hey, I need this resonator in my hand. Maybe it's a Rachel, maybe it's Jupiter, depends on the situation. So then I cast it 5th or 6th turn. It's very much a card that I suggest you don't activate immediately, just because you want to use it more of as a reactional card to plan one turn or that same turn. Next, we move on to Whirlwind Technique. 1 cost gives something barrier. I only have to explain how good that is. Moving on, we have Nature's Beauty. So like you see above, we have Nature's Beauty in the main deck, but we're also going to run in the Rune deck. Why? Because it's a good card. So in case I don't get to the Nature's Beauty in my hand, I always have Nature's Beauty in my Rune deck. I'll admit that I never really had to cast 2, but it was very much a factor that there was one time during the ARG where I wanted to cast 2. So I wanted to cast 1, swing in. I knew my opponent couldn't kill one of my resonators. It was going to come back to my turn. I would have swung in for lethal, but I didn't have the second one. So having one in the main and one in the Rune deck is very important to me. I think it just fits in so well. Next we're on to Bullet Ball, Thunderclap. So this is the card that makes the deck. It is a 1-cost quick cast. You banish something to also pay the cost. You target a resonator. If you pay the extra awakening, which is 2 green, 1 void, it also does the same damage from the banished resonator. From your resonator that you banish to your opponent. So this card you don't really use to kill resonators, you use to kill your opponent. So like I said, that +5/+5 early on from Arwen does become important because +5/+5 in a sense can mean +10/+10 instead. Such as if I'm swimming with disciples, naturally a 9/9 with if you have Lord out, I can pump it up now to 14/14. Maybe I tap Arwen again. Well, now he's a 19/19. You swing in, you hit them for 19, you gain 19, you bullet ball, you hit them for 19 again. Boom, that's 38 damage. They're probably dead. It's just such a great OTK. There's even times where I've hit someone for 1,000 bullet ball, and that's enough to kill them. It's all depending on the matchup and how much they burn themselves or how much early damage you can get in. But it's just one of those cards where it surprises people. A lot of times the ARG, people would be at 34 life. They feel like they're on top of the world. I'd hit them for 16 to 2,000. They would be a little scared, but knowing that I can't do it again that same turn, they wouldn't think that they were about to die. Then I bullet ball. They didn't have a way to cancel it. I won the game right then and there. So moving on, we have a pump, gain life, and draw a card type of chant. So it's the last thing in the Rune deck, and it simply just gives a little bit of a buff to something. It draws you a card, and it gains you a little bit of life in case you need that to survive. So just all around a good card. Moving to the sideboard. So the sideboard has 15 cards, obviously. So the first one is Destruction of the Portal. And Destruction of the Portal is important in my opinion, just because quick cast speed to kill the altars or any other mean old additions is important. Such as if your opponent plays the altar before having a resonator down, then when in response to playing like a Layla or something, you have the 2 mana. Now you can kill their altar. They can banish it. They just shuffle the deck then because they don't have any counters. Or you can force your opponent to make suboptimal banishes, such as they banish a Layla. In response, you kill the altar. Well, then they can, sack it with their 1 counter. if they so wish to, if they even have a counter on it. But then they're only getting a 1 cost, which is a lot better than them getting an Astema and just killing you. Next on is Tsunade. So Tsunade is a card I personally have talked to people in my locals about, and which I suggest that I wanted to play it, and they were all about it because it has barrier from chance. Also, it's a 2 cost that has 800 attack. So in a deck where attack means everything to me, 800 attack is really great. Him with the Tiger-Me that I run up above here. Sorry, the Eagle-Me, my bad. So she swings in for 3. Let's say they don't block it, that's 3 damage. Banish her. You hit with Tsunade. Awesome, that's 12 damage. Maybe you have the mana for it. Probably not if you're doing this, but let's say you do. You can Bullet Ball. You instantly hit them for another 12 damage. So it's 24 just from him, Bullet Ball, and then plus 3 from Eagle-Me. So you got a solid 27 damage in. So your opponent's at 13. If they're, not careful, they can just die from a lot of different things in your deck. So we have another Fierce Spell. Fierce Spell is a good card. It's mainly just for the matchups where you really just need to make sure your opponent can't get into certain cards, either on your turn or from killing you, and things of that nature. We have another Lorite. Lorite is a good card, like I mentioned before. The only reason why we're not playing 4 in the main deck is just a little bit of space and the fact that it's just not as needed as you would expect. But having one more on the side is really important, just because it gives you access to make sure that your opponent can't get off certain abilities, and depending on the matchups. Next we have the Barrier Castle. Barrier Castle is very simple. It's a wall of wind for all your wind resonators, as long as it's on the board. There's times where I've gotten at 2 of these. It makes it, a 1 cost destruction becomes a 3 cost destruction. 3 cost bounce becomes a 5 cost bounce. Things of that nature. It's just really good to play. Let's moving on to lastly is a Paralyzed Dragonoid. So it's just an anti-red card. There's not really anything in the game right now that you really want to remove counters from. Rhea technically, but Rhea doesn't see play. It's just mainly for the Rogue Isis and the pretty dominant Keurig. So it's not the most interrupting card, but canceling a chant or 2 here and there for one will does in fact help you. And if you play your cards right, removing your counters from Keurig can really help you. Next is Arrow Trap. Arrow Trap is something that I decided to put in there since it got rid of... it was 1 mana answer to a John if she didn't have Indestructible. It's a 1 mana answer to Majin. It's 1 mana answer to most 1 and some 2 cost things. And if it's a flying resonator, then I get to deal 1200, and that is always a good thing to do 1200. The only problem with this card that I saw later on was going against machines. I played against Colin from TCG Scrubs. He had some flyers on his board, but I believe the 2 that he had were 13s. So 1200 damage doesn't do enough. I didn't have a Mikkei or any way to ping, so I just pretty much had to sit there and just die because I couldn't do anything. So I very much say Dance of the Tengus is a card I wanted to play and ended up not playing on the sideboard. I really do think I should have, because it's a very good answer to flyers, which was pretty much why I played Arrow Trap. So I would at least try Dance Tengu, either take out 1 or both traps for that. And Scarlet's Agony. It's anti-aggro. There's nothing to explain. It's a 1 mana anti-aggro draw card. There's not much I can explain from that card, and it's just a good card all around. So that concludes this video. I just wanted to say thanks for watching, and I hope that I'm producing good content, and I hope that I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.